Let's preview the Sun Belt baseball tournament with Matt Stewart. It's Locked On Sun Belt.
You are Locked On Sun Belt, your daily podcast on the Sun Belt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sun Belt, your team every day. Thanks very much for hopping on. Always thrilled when we get our buddy Matt Stewart to come on. Him and his partner, Ty Harrington, will be broadcasting the Sun Belt Conference tournament. We kind of wrap up the season. We preview the tournament, who's in and who's not in terms of the NCAA tournament, player and pitcher of the year. We talk about favorites and surprises. Let's get to it. He is the voice of the Sun Belt Baseball Conference tournament. He is Matt Stewart on Locked On Sun Belt. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sun Belt, your team every day. Dave Schultz, always joined by our guy Matt Stewart before a championship round. Really appreciate it. Matt will have the call of the Sun Belt baseball tournament in Montgomery, and we're looking forward to it. Matt, thanks for hopping on. Why don't you recap the way you saw the Sun Belt baseball season this year? I think a little bit of a surprise who won it, and maybe a couple of surprises on who didn't.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised Louisiana won it. I mean, they got off to such a tremendous start at 14-1, you know, and like Coach Deggs told his players, because the schedule, it does depend upon the schedule and how that plays out. You need to make hay when you can make hay, and then you need to survive when you need to survive. And they kind of went through that you need to survive when they went 4-5 over 3 weekends after starting 14-1 in the conference. That included losing at Coastal, losing at Troy. And so, yeah. And then they came out, and I thought they made a statement when they went to Statesboro and swept the Eagles. That's a team that's the number 5 seed going into this tournament and a very solid program. But I thought they made a statement there. So, and I know we're going to talk about favorites in the tournament, but the top 2 seeds, although I do feel like there's a number of teams that can win this thing as we sit here right now on the eve of the start of this tournament. I see those guys, Southern Miss and Louisiana as the teams to beat. Now, if it plays out that way, I don't know, but I think so.
Is there anything to this? And I know the coaches and the players would poo-poo this, but last year the Cajuns needed to go on a run to get into the NCAA tournament, and they happened to get fortunate to beat a high RPI team in Coastal Carolina. Not one,
and of course, 2 years ago they absolutely had to win the tournament.
That's right. That's right. Now I happen to think, along with Coastal, as of right now, the Cajuns and Southern Miss are in. Is there anything to that their backs are not up against the wall, or obviously when they're trying to win, and when you're playing a game, you're trying to win, right? As Herm Edwards taught us, you play to win the game. But there's not nearly as much on the line for them. I mean, I think JMU has work to do. I think Troy has work to get
Coastal.
And
Coastal does too. I mean, simply because they can't lose the play-in game to Georgia State.
Right.
I mean, I think if they drop that game to Georgia State, they won't get in. I think, and I'm not saying there's any kind of partiality, but I think they would love to see Gary Gilmore get in.
Absolutely.
The legendary coach that, changed the landscape of college baseball. If only he now gave every mid-major the idea that you can do this. It's not an impossible thing when they won the championship in 2016. But I don't think they can lose to Georgia State in that single elimination. And it's not because they're not deserving. They are. Their resume is great. It's just there's so much competition for the final spots. And I talked about this with a number of the coaches. I've talked to all 10 coaches now as we get ready to start this tournament, and talked to them, a number of them, over the course of the season doing our podcast. The SEC's posing a problem for the Sun Belt and for a number of conferences because of the 5 teams that finished 13-7 and 17 in conference play. And you're talking about Florida, you're talking about South Carolina, you're talking about Vandy, you're talking about LSU, defending champions, you're talking about Alabama. 4 of those teams that I just rattled off here were national champions within the last decade to 15 years. And some of them are going to get in. Historically, 13 and 17, only a 38% chance to get into the NCAA regional if you do that. I think at least a couple of those teams are going to get in. So it's going to make it sticky for some other teams and then if you have upsets in some other tournaments. So I know D1 baseball had as many as five teams listed in a regional 2 weeks ago, and it's at 4. And hopefully it's 4 again. It'd be outstanding if it's 5, but I'm not sure that's going to be the case because I think something's going to happen in the tournament here where one of those 5 doesn't do enough and doesn't get in.
Yeah, we're talking with Matt Stewart, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Matt has the call of the Sunbelt Conference Tournament coming up this week in Montgomery, coming up later today with the first round matchups. Yes, I always thought, and the problem was with the Cajuns, and I just was not really thrilled with their out-of-conference schedule. It's over 100. They scheduled themselves to win 40 to 45 games, and they did that. They won the 40.
Yeah.
And if they don't lose to teams that they shouldn't have lost to, you don't lose 2 out of 3 to Rice. You beat Houston. You don't lose to Houston Baptist. All of a sudden, they probably have a top 30 RPI, where they could have been. And I think they're all set. I just didn't think if you could be in the top third, if you're a top 40 team, I'm nervous if I'm JMU. I'm just nervous, right? I'm absolutely on the bubble. That's I don't want to be a mid-major. Compare that to LSU, and it's LSU, and B, like you said, they're the defending national champs. They're going to get the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. Here's where JMU
group of 5 schools.
Yeah, and here's where JMU, and we talked about this too, and I believe this, unfortunately for them, and this is not to take anything away from what they were able to do this year, is even stacked up with some of those other teams in the Sun Belt, Louisiana, Southern Miss, and Troy, and Coastal. They don't have the cachet. They don't have the history.
Right.
They're not getting the benefit of the doubt. They haven't been in an NCAA regional since 2011. So to me, they got to do a little bit more. Is that fair? Probably not.
No, because they do have the schedule.
Yeah. I think that's the reality. But I mean, number one, Coastal's got to win, got to beat Georgia State, or our conversation, I feel, unfortunately, will be over for them. And I think Troy and James Madison, they can't go 2 and out. They absolutely can't go 2 and out. And they might have to win a couple of games, but they definitely can't go 2 and out.
Right. Oh, wow. Okay, for Troy. All right.
Their RPI because they
have an awful schedule.
Yeah, because they lost 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
They won 8 in a row, but I think they're only 1-5 or 2-6, something of that nature since they won those 8 in a row.
Right.
And I talked to Skylar about this, and he doesn't feel like they've gotten cold or they've slid or anything like that. His message, he goes, and we went through all the games, and he's like, we make a play here, we make a pitch here, you get a hit here, then it doesn't look like we're cold. He says it isn't like we were a different team than we were, other than maybe a play here and there in those games that they haven't won since that win.
That's what everyone.
But that said, I mean, their RPI slipped into the 50s after losing 2 out of 3 to James Madison. So.
Yeah. And they have a schedule RPI out of non-conference schedule in the 200s. So Troy will definitely not get the benefit of the doubt. Let's take a time out. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Matt Stewart. We will talk about the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. We talk about, is there enough pitching in the Sun Belt Conference Tournament? Do managers and coaches stick to the plan, or do they change it based on what's going on? And why do Sun Belt Conference coaches continue to pitch to Kyle DeBarge? We'll do that when we come back. Let me tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who are actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other job leading sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's continue our conversation with Matt Stewart. He's on the call of the Sunbelt Conference Baseball Tournament. We talk Southern Miss Golden Eagles. We talk, do we have enough pitching in the Sunbelt Conference Tournament? The teams are kind of banged up. And why do they keep on pitching to Kyle DeBarge? Also, a little bit of a surprise. Coastal Carolina, they are in the single elimination tournament. We do that now with Matt Stewart on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. We did talk Cajuns baseball a little bit. Let's talk Southern Miss. First-year head coach, setting a record for first-year head coaches for the Golden Eagles. And they are hot coming into the conference tournament.
Yeah, Christian Ostrander's group is absolutely playing their best ball at the right time. And he made a valid point. He says, hey, look, we've been doing this. This has kind of been a yearly thing for us. I mean, where we peak at the right time. We start playing our best ball in the month of May, and then into regionals, and then to super regionals. So the issue with those guys a little bit, it's the same issue that a lot of teams, maybe outside of the Cajuns, have, is the pitching. I mean, they're down to 2 starting pitchers. Right. They got Billy Oldham and they got Nico Mazza. They got 2 starting pitchers, and then they got a bunch of guys, and they're going to have to use some bullpen guys in some starting roles. And I think a number of teams outside of the Cajuns are going to be kind of doing pod pitching, or like Gary Gilmore described. He goes, we got a bunch of 50 pitch guys. And I think there's a lot of teams in the league that are kind of in that boat for what a number of reasons. In Coastal's case, it's just been a boatload of injuries to guys that they thought were going to be contributors for them this year, just haven't been because of injuries. But I think there's a lot of teams in that boat where they got guys that can maybe hopefully get you 9 outs, get you through the order once.
So let's talk about that.
And you just piece it, and you got to piece it together. And I think there'll be a lot of teams. I think we'll have a lot of pitching changes during this tournament.
He's Matt Stewart. He's got the call of the Sunbelt Conference Tournament on ESPN Plus beginning today. Single elimination. We'll get to that here in a second. So let's talk about that, because I've seen it, whether it has been in softball recently or baseball. You have a plan. The plan is working, and then you try to stretch the plan out, and it explodes in front of your face. Do you think you get these guys who are, all of a sudden he's not at 50 pitches. He's at 48. So maybe we can get him a 4th inning, and all of a sudden that second time around the lineup,
good.
Do you stick to the plan, or do you adjust based on what's happening in the game?
Well, you have to adjust based on what's happening in the game, because your margin of error is gone. It's not like, okay, if we drop this game, we still got the next game to come back and get, because there's consequences. Even if it's the first loss, now you've dropped yourself into the losers bracket. So that's the beauty of the tournament. There's consequences to it. If you're in the double elimination and you lose a game, now you're in the losers bracket. You just made things hard on yourself. Like Louisiana last year ends up having to play, 6 games because they got into the losers bracket. Or, of course, if you already have a loss, the consequence is you're done, and your season might be done. And you just don't know until you sit around and watch ESPN on Memorial Day at noon to find out, did you get in the regional? So you have to adjust based on what's happening right in front of you. And you got to weigh that based on, your body of work with that pitcher. How confident are you that you can stretch it and get another? And it also depends on what you got sitting down there in the bullpen. Right. Is what you got sitting down in the bullpen better than what you got on the mound right now? Right. So there's going to be a lot of that. Again, Louisiana's in the best shape pitching-wise than anybody else from a starting standpoint. And, I think we are moving towards, in college baseball in particular, but also is happening in the majors, where the significance of the starting pitcher is less than less. They're, if they can get you 5, then you're going to piece it together from here on out. The problem, the difference between college baseball doing it and Major League Baseball doing it is they got pros. They got guys who are elastic. They got guys that can bounce back. They got guys that can go on consecutive days, and some of them can go 3 days. Most college teams don't have that. No. Most college teams got a guy, and he can go out there and give you some innings, and he can maybe come back out the next day for a really short one, or he's going to have to take a day off. And he comes back that second day, 3 days later, and he's not nearly as effective. So, I mean, that's the reality of it in the difference with college baseball and the pros.
And then you may have a Blake Marshall who out of nowhere, right, becomes this legend pitching,
like he did last year.
Innings in a couple of days and put the Cajuns into the championship game against Southern Miss and able to get them in the NCAA tournament. We're talking to Matt Stewart, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, so we talked. I thought maybe the Cajuns were a little bit of a surprise to win the Sunbelt regular season. I think Coastal was picked to win it. As you mentioned, they're banged up.
And
they're playing
had they not had the arm injuries.
Right.
Correct.
Right. People use that as an excuse. That's a reason to me. It is what it is. But they're the 7th seed. So basically, the Cajuns as a 1 seed won't play Coastal Carolina. They won't play Coastal Carolina.
Correct.
They get the lowest seed. They'll either play Georgia State, South Alabama, or ODU. Coastal, if they win, ends up playing Southern Miss. But I mean, all of a sudden, I guess my big question here is, we do have some teams, Georgia Southern, Troy, and Coastal, that have some very favorable ballparks to their lineup. The lineups are built for their ballparks. What about when it gets to a more fair pitch? I don't know about Pitcher's Park, but a more fair park in Montgomery? Because like you said, all of a sudden, Coastal's got to win a single elimination game. And then all of a sudden, Southern Miss is looking up. We're playing Coastal Carolina in our first match.
Yeah. Well, it's scary. And I'm not saying that Coastal Carolina isn't scary, because they can bang the ball with the best.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. They can score a ton of runs. And Ty Harrington, of course, who's my color commentator, we were joking. I mean, that the first game of the tournament is Georgia State and Coastal. That might be 21-19 in a 5-hour game. I mean, we're going to be behind schedule after the first game.
Right.
If that game plays out the way their series played out, which was ridiculous. I mean, it was 17-13. Coastal won the opener. Georgia State won the second game 10-9. And then, it was a 17-7 run rule victory for Coastal in the third game of that series against Georgia State. But I remember I was watching this game on Sunday, and it's game 3 of that series. And Georgia State has a 6-3 lead in the 6th inning. I'm thinking, my gosh, Coastal's staring at the end of their season right here.
Right.
Yeah. So Coastal's season they're staring at the end of their season right there. And Georgia State runs out of pitching, and, they got it, honestly, it's just the state they are. They got about pitching for 2.5 games. So, and that's what happened to them in the Coastal series. It's kind of what happened to them in the Old Dominion series this past week. They got enough to get them through 2.5 games. And so that, Georgia State, just to touch on them real quick, I believe they got a big future in front of them with the new stadium coming.
That's right.
They got the new stadium coming. So, but it's not now. They're not going to be able to make a deep run in this tournament if they're able to make a run at all. And they're in a tough spot having to face this Coastal team that, like we've already pointed out, is playing for their lives. But they got a big future in front of them. Old Dominion's getting a new stadium too. Just touch on some of those guys that we haven't talked about yet, but Old Dominion's getting a new stadium too. They're going to play all road games next year, believe that or not.
Oh boy.
Yeah, they're trying to work it out so that they can play their conference home games at the Norfolk Tides minor league park, but they got they won't have any home non-conference games. So that's going to make it a little tough on them next year. I know that we went a little bit off the beaten path right there, but Coastal's got to win this game. This play.
Yes, I agree with that. So, okay. He is Matt Stewart, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Matt's got the call. Is Ty doing the games with you up in Montgomery?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Ty's doing the games with me. It'll be the 3rd straight year Ty's been doing the games with me. He brings a great element to the game, the coaching element to the game. He is really, and he sees the teams. He does Texas State and he does Texas radio. So, yeah, I look forward to working with him again. He'll do a great job.
All right, so then maybe you can answer this question. I don't know if you've discussed it with him, because I just felt it was, it's been ridiculous for a month, and this will lead right into the Player of the Year award. And I don't think it's quite the slam dunk that maybe I thought it did for Kyle DeBarge, because Banks Tolley had a phenomenal year for App State. But they kept on pitching to Kyle DeBarge. I'm coming back from actually calling Louisiana high school softball, and even Jay Walker and the Cajuns had done nothing with Southern Miss, and there's a base open and they're losing 2-0, and yet they still pitch to Kyle DeBarge, and Jay Walker goes, I'm not pitching to Kyle DeBarge. I don't know why they would do that. He gives up a 3-run home run. Then they do it again, gets a 2-run single, and then they kept on doing it at Coastal. They did it Georgia Southern. And then South Alabama actually walked him a couple of times and then decided we're pitching to him, and then he made that base. Why did they keep on pitching to Kyle DeBarge? I understand that they're already maybe on second and third base, but if third base is open, that's still a base that is open. I'm going to let the next guy hit the grand slam. And if he does, tip your cap to him. He's just not Kyle DeBarge.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, to me, it's a situation by situation thing, obviously, and you got to weigh it out. I mean, what's the benefit to doing it? What's the downside to doing it?
Not losing is the benefit of doing it.
Yeah, well, and he's getting big hits, but then you incentivize the next guy to maybe get the big hit and put it on his plate. And it's not like right now over the weekend they had John Taylor batting behind him in the 4 spot, and I like Taylor a lot.
You're right.
I like him a lot. And so, I mean, I can use the example you were talking about. South Carolina was playing Georgia 2 weekends ago, and Charlie Condon, who leads the nation in home runs, comes up, and it was a tie game at the time, 6-6. They put Condon on to load the bases, and Georgia pinch hits a guy, Logan Jordan, and he hits a grand slam, game over, so you got guys behind them that, I mean, as good as they are,
right?
But sometimes the situation does dictate that you walk them. I agree.
Sure. I know Tony Robichaux didn't like walking them because it's not the pros where these guys, college pitchers, maybe start to nibble a little bit with the bases loaded compared to what you do in professional ball. But, if there's a choice between Charlie Condon hitting a 3-run home run, or what'd you say, Logan Jordan, I'm going to go with Logan Jordan every single time because, I got better odds with Logan Jordan doing it.
No, you're right. No doubt. You're right about that.
He did.
Tony was right about that. A pro pitcher with the bases loaded, it's not the same thing as a college pitcher with the bases loaded.
Correct.
Yeah, he's totally right about that. I mean,
and by the time you get late in a game, in a college game, who knows what you're pitching.
Even more so.
All right, one more timeout. We'll come back and wrap up our conversation with Matt Stewart on the call of the Sun Belt Conference Tournament. We'll come back and talk Pitcher of the Year, Player of the Year. There seems to be a battle for Player of the Year, maybe not so much Pitcher of the Year. And we do that next with Matt Stewart right after I tell you about Yahoo Finance. All right, thanks to Yahoo Finance for sponsoring today's episode of Locked On Sunbelt. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking at that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They're the number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. Comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's continue our conversation with Matt Stewart on the call of the Sunbelt Conference Tournament with Ty Harrington beginning later today. We talk about the Player of the Year, and it may be a little bit of a battle for Kyle DeBarge and Banks Tolley, but the Pitcher of the Year seems to be solidified. You'll find out by who. We wrap things up with Matt Stewart on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day, right now. All right, so let's quickly talk about that. We'll wrap things up with Matt Stewart. He's got the call with Ty Harrington of the Sun Belt Conference Tournament beginning later today. First game up is Coastal Carolina and Georgia State. So Player of the Year, I got, again, my belief, generally speaking, best player on the best team. That's Kyle DeBarge on the Cajuns. Banks Tolley had a great year. Sam Antonacci had a great year. Brooks Bryan had a good year. But again, I just happen to think it's the best player on the best team. And this year, that's Kyle DeBarge. I don't think it's a slam dunk, as many people might, because Banks Tolley led the league.
Not a slam dunk. Yeah, it's not a
home runs. And he's just had a phenomenal season.
It's not a slam dunk, but I do agree that I do believe that Kyle DeBarge, who was the preseason player of the year, will also be the player of the year postseason. I do believe that best player. He hit 21 home runs.
Yeah,
it wasn't like he didn't have a great season, and he's rated by D1 Baseball as the number one shortstop in all of college baseball. I mean, that's huge. It's the toughest position. It's the anchor position for your defense. If you don't have a shortstop, you don't have a defense. And, so you got to take the defensive component into that. Banks Tolley had a fabulous season. 25 home runs, blew by the program record that C.J. Boyd had set just last year. Had a fabulous season. Plays outfield, not shortstop. Not taking anything away from the outfield. Outfield's important too.
Sure.
But I think DeBarge, I think Slade Wilkes, but he's a DH, for Southern Miss. I mean, he's getting close to a 30-game hitting streak as we go into the tournament. And he's been hitting bombs. Fenwick Trimble from James Madison is a guy.
Yeah.
Bryan, Brooks Bryan that you mentioned, leads the country in RBI, but the average is below 300. So, all of them have something that disqualifies them a little bit in my mind, except for, I don't have any disqualifiers for DeBarge. I don't have any disqualifiers for Tolley in the head-to-head comparison. I think you got to take the defensive component into consideration, and DeBarge is a shortstop and Tolley is not. And Trimble, I don't have any warts on Trimble's resume, but he's an outfielder. So I'm still going with DeBarge, but I think all those guys right there with Bryan, like I said, the batting average with Wilkes, he's a DH. So.
And I really hadn't been paying attention to pitcher of the year. There doesn't seem to be a dominant starting pitcher. Herman's got some good numbers, but he struggled. Chase Morgan, I guess, could do it, but he only got 4 wins. A lot of that because he's only going, like we mentioned, he's a freshman. He's had a great year. It could be a freshman All-American, but he doesn't have a whole lot of wins. And then you just look at LP Langevin's numbers.
Langevin's the guy.
50% of the batters that he's faced. That's outrageous.
Yeah. Langevin's the guy. I mean, he's just. And to call him a relief pitcher is a little bit, he is a relief pitcher. He doesn't start, but Deggs now has him in a position where he can throw him 5 innings, maybe 6 if he has to. He's pitching the length of what a lot of starting pitchers give you.
Yeah.
He's just not doing it at the beginning of the game. And he's just been so dominant. I know Deggs feels like he's a big leaguer in the future. And I think he's the pitcher of the year, especially when you give consideration to the fact that there is no clear-cut dominant starting pitcher like we've had in the league, like we always seem to have in the league, like his pitching coach used to be, Gunnar Leger, in the league. It was easy, when Gunnar was in there, he's giving you 10, 11 wins a season, sub-2 ERA. There's none of those guys. There's some really good starting pitching, don't get me wrong, but Langevin to me is the candidate.
He is Matt Stewart. He's got the call with Ty Harrington on ESPN Plus for the Sun Belt Conference Baseball Tournament. We are going 3 p.m. Central Time, Coastal Carolina and Georgia State. Is that correct?
That is correct. And then we got the second game I love. I think the second game, we haven't even talked about. South Alabama is a sneaky good team, and I think they're a team. And I know we're getting ready to wrap this up, but I'll just throw this out there. Their RPI is 62 right now.
Right.
And there's a lot of RPI value. They knock off some big teams, higher RPI teams, in the bracket if they get by that first game. And,
well, they just they got run ruled, but they also run ruled the Cajuns.
Right. And Degg says it was legit. They had, now Louisiana had just clinched the regular season title.
Right.
And it's rare that you clinch the regular season title and then an hour later you got to play another game. Right. But that was the case because it was a doubleheader. But watch out for South Alabama. they are in a position to maybe sneak in there and get in the at-large conversation, which would not that doesn't mean Sunbelt's getting another. They're taking it away from somebody. If they get in the conversation, they've taken it away from somebody.
That's right.
So,
yeah,
but watch out for that team.
We'll see if somebody else besides, the big 3 or 4, Cajuns, Southern Miss, Troy, and I would say Coastal Carolina wins it. See if, an ODU or South Alabama makes a run, or a JMU makes a run, as the Cajuns actually did last year and 2 years ago. He's Matt Stewart. He's got the call with Ty Harrington, 3 p.m. Coastal Carolina and the Georgia State Panthers. Really appreciate your time, Matt. Have a great call. Thank you so much for hopping on Lockdown Sunbelt. Tell people about your podcast with Ty Harrington. You're competing with
we've done a podcast all year, Sunbelt Baseball with Matt and Ty. It's a really complicated name. It's Sunbelt Baseball, and it's Matt and it's Ty. But yeah, we've been doing that, and we do an interview with a coach every week. And of course, we're not doing one this week because we just simply don't have time to knock one out. But we'll come back and wrap it up and do at least one more going into the NCAA regionals once we know who's in, and we'll preview the NCAA regionals with this team. But it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate your time, Matt. Always do. Thanks so much. Have a great call. Thank you very much.